All right. So we spent last week's conversation on the podcast talking about what lead sources you were going to prospect if you needed cash flow and clients as fast as possible. And you guys can go watch that video. I'll put a link in the description for that. But today we're going to talk about kind of the opposite of that, Tucker, right? So we spent last week talking about, okay, if you need cash as quickly as possible, you're probably going to run to for sale by owners, expireds, et cetera. And the upside to those is conversion timeline. That's the upside. But today I want to talk about all the downside to that and what you can do to counter the downside, if that makes sense. You with me on that?
Yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, on one hand, if you're just chasing the deal of the day, like there's a reason why realtors only last so long in our industry, right? One's just no business at all. Then the others that are actually finding business, it's just a hustle and a grind every day, and not everyone's built for it. But hey,
That's
maybe
right.
there's a way that we can make this not so transactional, not so exhausting when you wake up every day. And that's what this is about.
That's right. And that's a great way to put it. So it's transactional versus what we call a pipeline business model. And so, again, both have pros and cons. But today we're going to talk about what does it mean to build a pipeline business model and what would the pros be. So, again, let's just define the two for those people that haven't watched the episode last week. A transactional business model is one where your prospecting effort is built around lead sources that would convert the fastest. So as an example, we talked a lot about, early bird expired listings. We talked about old and new expires. We talked about for sale by owners. We talked about for rent by owners. These are all lead sources you would go after that would help you to convert and create cash flow as quickly as possible. Very appealing to a lot of agents. I understand that. The downside, however, comes with tons of competition. You do not get to pick price point. You have no ability to pick where you work. And so you kind of get what you get. You can't throw a fit, right? That's what they say. And so you're just chasing this business all over town. Some agents are driving an hour and a half to go to an appointment with an expired listing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So as the upside is, hey, I can get cash flow as quickly as possible. There's a lot of downsides. You want to add anything to that before we talk about what a pipeline business model means?
No, I mean, I think you pretty much nailed it. You really are like when you get your daily list of expireds or FSBOs that may have come on the market, like you don't get to pick what neighborhoods that popped up in. It's just you, along with every other agent in your market that cold calls, are all looking at the same deals in the same places. So you're all hunting for that same thing, and it's tough and it's not easy pickings. So you're kind of at the whim of just whatever the market hands you every day.
That's right. So the opposite of that is what we call a pipeline business model. So that is where you're going to actually pick where you prospect, meaning price point, neighborhoods, geographic area, etc. You're going to, which is the upside, right? I think most agents, when they got into this business or shortly after, they have this vision of being the neighborhood realtor, right? They can picture there's signs everywhere in the communities in which they serve, the communities where they live, the communities where their kids grow up. That's kind of like the ultimate goal. And chasing a cash flow business model, you don't get that benefit. And so a pipeline business model is where you're going to go after certain areas on purpose. And the downside is it might take a little bit longer to build that pipeline before you start to see the fruits of your labor. And we'll get into lead sources in just a second. But that's the key difference, right? One has quicker cash flow, quicker turn times, but maybe not as an enjoyable business model because of the urgency, et cetera. And then a pipeline business has just the opposite. You get to pick price point, area, et cetera, but it's going to take longer to build the pipeline. So you want to add anything to that before we get into the weeds of this?
Yeah, we talked, the very first video we did when you brought me onto this team was what would I have done differently
Hmm.
if I could go back to the beginning? This is probably one of the number one things I would have done if I could go back is walking around my neighborhood like I should be the go-to realtor in the neighborhood, right? And so when I see someone else's sign with their face on it in my neighborhood, I'm just sitting there like that cheese ball taken up. This is my corner. This is my street. Like
That's right.
so, but it's my fault for not building up that business. So if I could go back to day one, even if I need cash flow right now, I would be building the pipeline. It's going to give me fruits of labor 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line. I'll be doing this from day one. I wouldn't wait to do this.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I guess let me ask you this question too, as a newer agent. Um, let's just take out the potential upside of like FSBOs and expireds and say, okay, if you could choose the type of business you service, is there any doubt, like, is there any case you would make on why you would go after for sale by owners and expired still? If everything else was the same, would you just build a business around this pipeline model we're talking about? Or would you still make an argument for why you would want to still go after FSBOs and expireds?
If we're removing the timeline that it takes
Yes.
to get these people to typically turn over, 100%, these are the people I would go after. Because these people, a lot of times, you've been nurturing them over a period of time. And so they're the ones calling you saying, hey, I'd like to list my house. Can you come over and show me what that would look like? Secondly, if you take a look at expireds, there's a reason why they expired. A lot of times it is the agent, right? The agent took poor pictures, they had funky pricing going on. Um, Something like that was the agent. A lot of times too, it's also maybe that person is unreasonable about what their home should be priced at. Maybe it's that that seller is extremely difficult to work with, and the agent just threw their hands up and said, "I can't do this anymore," and and they cut ties. And those are the people that you're now going to have to deal with. And then with a for sale by owner, a lot, not saying this is always the case, but a for sale by owner may not respect realtors, may not respect your business, respect you, has doubts about you, might be questioning you all along the way because they're for sale by owner. They can do it better. So or you're just like cutting in on their profits. So that kind of attitude goes along with the expireds and the FSBOs. Not always, but a lot of times. Versus a lot of times these more pipeline business. These are your neighbors. These are your friends. These are the people around you. They know you. They want to give you the business instead of you going out and hunting for the business
Yeah.
always.
No doubt. And we're going to do a couple different exercises. I'm going to share this iPad here in just a second. So let's get into, let's unpack this for the audience so they can get a better idea of kind of what we're talking about. I think when we start to talk about this type of business model, it's easy to throw out terms like, circle prospecting or things of that nature. And so I want to give the audience a visual of this thing. All right. I think this will make a lot of sense. So here, let me share my screen. All right. So here's the way I think about this, Tucker. I want to get obviously your feedback on this as well. So if we just take this, I'll just make a really bad geographic area on purpose. Let's just say this was a map view, and you've got all these homes. All right. So we'll just have just a bunch of these homes all over town. And they're just scattered everywhere, right? They're just scattered everywhere. So the thing is, big, small, there's just houses everywhere. I don't know why this is not working so well. Here's the thing. Before I would say, okay, so here's what circle prospecting is, right? Circle prospecting is go call everybody. Go call all these people and try to find out who may be selling. Now, yes, the upside to this, like we just talked about, is that perhaps this entire area is where you would like to get listings, right? It's like, I would like to get my sign into any of these front yards. I'd love to build my business anywhere. So that's like the draw to circle prospecting. However, before that, I think there's something that people should consider. And this is where I want your feedback. So what if you could pick the same geographic area, but you're going to, instead of just shotgunning and calling just anybody and everybody, would it make more sense to focus your attention on the homeowners, Tucker, that had the highest likelihood to sell? It's not a FSBO, it's not expired. We don't know for sure, but would it make more sense that in this process of building your business using this model to hone in the focus on where areas you think would make more sense? So question, your thoughts on that. And let me just give somebody an example of what we're talking about. So this might be a list of downsizers. This might be a free and clear. Someone has no mortgage, right? This might be somebody who maybe this is an absentee owner. So that's what I mean. Give me your thoughts on that first and foremost.
I mean, without a doubt. I mean, I'll ask the opposite of that question. In what world would it make sense to call the people less likely to sell?
That's right.
And so, like, if there are people who they may not be doing business right now, but they're going to be much more likely to maybe do business in 12, 18 months, 6 months, somewhere in there. So that way, when you get to 6, 12, 18 months down the line, I'm still maybe going to call my expireds, my FSBOs of the day. But then I may also have the people that I talk to, my downsizers I talked to 6 to 12 months ago, they're also going to call me and say, hey, I've been getting your emails. I've been getting your postcards. Can you come over? We're thinking about selling now. And then you can take it from there. You've now successfully built both an outbound business and an inbound business.
That's right. That's exactly right. And so if we just stay on this for a second, here's what I want here's what I want real estate agents to really grasp. And I know I go really deep on things. I hope that it's helpful. But here's, like, if you look at the characteristics of someone who sells their home, like, if we just brainstorm on this for 5 minutes, right? People do so because of life events. You know what I mean? And so if you look at this and you say, okay, well, let's just label some. Maybe they have unused equity that they're looking to cash out, right? Maybe it's age. Maybe it's size, bigger, smaller. Maybe it's baby. You know a thing about that. Maybe it's maybe it's a death. Maybe it's a divorce. Maybe it's marriage. Right? Give me some more. What else can you think of like life events and why people would want to actually make a move?
They got a job change.
There you go.
They lost a job. They have too much debt now and they can't cover that. So I mean the big ones I always think of are, you already got most of them: death, debt, divorce, or deferred maintenance. Like, hey, maybe an absentee owner, they just haven't kept up with the property and they're like, I don't want to keep up with this. Then maybe they'll want to sell it.
100%. So here's my point. My point is, if you make a decision, if you could choose to say, okay, well, if I'm going to call, let's just say if you're going to call 20 people, would it make more sense to call 20 people that you know are somewhere in this world versus it just be random, right?
Yeah, 100%.
It's just it's so clear, right? I mean, there's no argument. I don't see why anyone would make an argument here. So that's my point. Going back to this thing, it's like, before I would just draw a circle around a city and hit dial. Like, before you did that, you may want to consider doing a little bit of what we talked about a couple of weeks ago on the show, which is to do a little bit of homework on building some lists around some specific demographics. You agree with that?
Absolutely. And if you can stack them, even better. If I find someone who is a absentee owner, who's older and owns it free and clear and has just way too much house, like, man, that person's begging to get rid of that house.
That's right. That's exactly right. So I think what you were saying before, give them another visual, is to say, okay, let's just say someone's making 20 contacts a day. Again, for the audience, I always get a comment in the comment section. What's a contact? A contact is simply a conversation with the decision maker. So you call Bob Smith, you get Bob Smith on the phone. So if an agent's making 20 conversations a day, I think what you're saying, which is what I try to coach agents to do from day one, it's very hard because they're very addicted to now business. I understand that. But you're saying, had you gone back, how would you split up what we call our contact distribution is what we call it?
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, when I started, I was 100% now business. That's all I went for. And then as time went on, I'm like, man, I've got no pipeline. I wish I've had a little bit more to work off of. So if I went back to the beginning, I probably would be making about 50% of all my contacts, like right now business. I'd probably be about my expireds, my FISBOs, those people ready to do business right now. That's what we call it. Probably another 25% pipeline business. So that's going to be the people that are your absentee owners, your downsizers, those kinds of people. And then the remaining 25% would most likely be like lead follow up. So, and if you're starting out and you don't have any leads, like you have no leads, this is day one for you, I'd probably shift this to be a little bit more of, and I need cash right now. It's probably going to be 75-25 now business to pipeline business. That's where I would land.
Totally. Makes total sense. So you're like, you're going to do, and this makes prospecting a lot more manageable. Instead of saying, dude, I got who like 20 conversations, who are those people going to be? Well, now you can really focus to say, okay, just get 10 here, get 5 here, and get 5 here. Right? And then it's like you can split this up. You can say, okay, I'm going to spend 2 hours here. I'm going to spend an hour here, and I'm going to spend an hour here. And that's kind of what your prospecting could look like. That's how I would distribute your energy and effort and your focus around building your business. And to your point, this is going to pay the bills today. But eventually, when this starts to pick up, you're going to get higher price listings, higher average commission because there's no competition. And then eventually, I think what most agents would like for this to look like would be more like this. Or it's the opposite, right? You split this up and you say, okay, I want 50% pipeline. I want 25 FISBOs and expireds, 25%, I'm going to call this lead follow-up, past clients, centers of influence, right? Then it goes further, right? So I would say like this is probably your first 1 to 3 years in the business, then this is probably like 3 to 5 years. But then 5 years plus, here's what I've always told agents too. Then you can kind of split this up and it looks a little even different. It's like 50% SOI, PC, right? And then you've got 25% pipeline, 25% lead follow-up. And that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
and then you're not having to chase and hunt out. Because here's the deal. Every single person who's a new agent knows that person in their office who you go to them. This was my experience. I went to someone's office. Hey, you're an agent doing $10 million a year in sales volume. You're making about $300K a year. How are you generating leads? And they're like, oh, I've just been in business for 10, 15 years. And it's all just referrals.
That's right.
That's this business. This is the person who's just sitting back, collecting fat checks, doing not really much of anything. They're just working. They're working their friends, their families. They send them a card with $5 of Starbucks in there every 6 months and says, hey, thinking of you, enjoy a coffee on me. Hope you're doing well. And then that person, in exchange for a $5 Starbucks card, gets them to sell their house and get them a commission check for 20 grand.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's why everyone got into this business. They got into this business because they thought they were going to get all their business from sphere of influence, past clients, referral sources, et cetera. It just takes time to get there. And then you're not chasing this, what I would say is like the necessary evil. It's business that you, if you had to choose, would rather not have, but you kind of need it for the first couple of years to build some cash. But then you don't have to go chase these anymore. And this is the problem. This is why we made this episode, is most agents don't do what you just said. They don't do this in the first 1 to 3 years. and they only focus on this. And guess what? They wake up in 5 years only still having to chase FSBOs and expireds. They have no past clients. They have no centers of influence. They have no pipeline. They have none of that going. It's purely a transactional business, right? And so that's why they're still having to buy leads. They're still having to do open house. They still have to do Zillow leads. They still have to cold call expireds. You don't have to do that if you build this the right way. All right, let me shift gears. Let me go to this real quick. So that it's really, really, really clear, what I'd like to do is talk about like essentially a visual with pros and cons. All right. So like on the cash flow business model, I mean, again, we just talked about the biggest upside here is conversion time. You can go get a listing today, right? So like I would say, obviously, if we looked at this, you'd get let's do that. I don't want to erase that. This would be green for good, and then this would be red because it takes a long time, right? What else would be an upside on cash flow? Like outside of conversion time, what else is good about it?
Um, you know, yeah, hey, you know what? Here's what I'll say. You're going to get some really, really sharp skills doing this because it is so competitive. You have to be on your A game. Like you have to know how to rebuttal people. When someone asks you, we lower your commission. What are your commissions? Well, we're going to think about it. You have to know how to get past all that because they're talking to 3 to 5 other agents. In a pipeline business, it's almost guaranteed that they're not talking to another agent. Um, they've been getting your postcard, like I said earlier, they've been getting your postcards, your emails, your calls, your texts, handwritten notes. They've been getting that over the past 12 to 18 months. No one else is following up the way that we do and building that relationship the way we do. So when you get to the appointment, it's it's not a guarantee, but it's pretty dang close to in the bag. You're probably the only person they're talking to. So cash flow business, it's highly competitive, and out of that competitiveness, you're going to be sharp.
You're right. You know, iron sharpens iron. So like your sales skills go up dramatically. And the other skill that goes up too is your ability to like get these listings sold. That's the other thing it gives you. It's like, all right, well, I'm taking a property that maybe is less than perfect with, you know, managing a very emotional seller oftentimes and having to navigate the marketplace on how to position this property, how to price this property, how to market this property, how to communicate with other agents, how to communicate with, and like getting this thing to the closing table where other agents couldn't, right? So that's a massive, massive, massive upside. So yes, outside of those two, I don't know that there's an argument for many more. Like on this side of the equation, though, I think there's a lot, right? So we talked about the ability to really what it comes down to is like if you had to make a choice, you can pick location, you can pick the price point, which is just amazing. You could pick the type of property, right? It's like, dude, I just love selling condos in this building. If you're in a certain market, you can decide, you can make a decision, right? And so for all of these, it's like, that's a lot of upside. You know what I mean? Oh, and by the way, probably the biggest one, right? To your point, is like no competition. I mean, that's huge. And so that's why, oh, and then I'll tell you, so which then correlates with money. You know what I mean? Because because competition, if there's more competition, dude, there's going to be a compression on compensation for sure. Like, I don't care who you are. Like, when there's more competition, your price is going to get lower on average. On average, doesn't have to. You know what I mean? When I'm talking about price, I'm talking about your commission rate. You know what I mean? And so, what else would you add, or what would you add to this part?
Yeah, so I would say with the pipeline business, outside of the initial call you make to get them in your world, this is largely an inbound business. Like
Yeah.
these people are getting your calls, emails, all that stuff. They're getting that. And so eventually the time will come where they're going to call you and say, "Hey, Tucker, can you come over and list my house?" Instead of you like calling someone, "Okay, I'll come over." That's a purely outbound business. I will come over, I'm calling you now. I'll come over tonight and I will try to win your business. The other side is you're calling and it's more inbound. And then the follow-up calls that you might be making, and we have tactics and everything, but a lot of times those outbound calls when you're following up, especially to past clients, it's, hey, I just saw on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, I saw your son like just had a football game. Looks like they won. How's that going? How's life going? Cool. Like, and then it's just staying in their world. It's staying top of mind. It's a much more friendly conversation because you've already serviced them. Um, I would say it's a huge thing is once you get to this point, you have built both an outbound and an inbound business. That's a huge advantage.
No doubt. And this goes back to kind of what you were saying before, like with the sales skills with an outbound business. Not only do your prospecting skills have to be like amazing, but your presentation skills have to be amazing. Like,
Yeah.
because when you're on the appointment, you are competing head to head with really, really good salespeople. On this side of the equation, I think what you're saying, just so the audience doesn't miss it, most times you don't even have to give a listing presentation to win the business because the business is being won through lead follow up. Yeah. So to your point, it's like make initial call, generate lead, follow up, put them in a follow up system. And through the follow up, the business is being earned so that it's an inbound. It's like, all right, well, cool, Tucker. I know we talked a couple months ago. You've been staying in touch with us. We're ready to list our house. Come on over. We're ready to go. And then you go there and it's a conversation around paperwork and what's being kept and what's being sold and where do you want the lockbox. You don't really have to win the client. The client's already been converted. That's kind of what you're saying, right?
Exactly. So, I mean, like by the time you gotten over there, they're in their mind, they're thinking this guy has been following up with me for 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, however long it's been. This guy's been following up with me. I'm finally ready to do business. Like this is the kind of person I want working for me. That's where I've had that happen before where, someone I called them on the day that they expired. I didn't win that business, but they stayed in my world with my follow up system. I wasn't calling them to try and. It's the only thing I changed. I wasn't actively calling them because they're on the market with someone else, but they were still getting my emails, my other follow ups. And then they said to me, 6 months had gone by, they still hadn't sold, and they called me to say, "Hey, things aren't going so hot. Can you come over and see what it looks like to do business with you?" Won the business, sold the house. And by the time I got over there, like they said, I asked them, I was like, "So what's going on? Like, you're already on the market. Like, why not just lower the price and get this home sold to what I'm telling you to?" And they were like, "Well, the thing is that, when we look at the way you do business, you're the kind of agent we're working for. So we just chose our friend. And now we're looking back and seeing how that was a mistake. We want someone to work for us who chases us down the way that who's going to go chase down buyers the way that you chased us down. That's what we want."
It's great. That's exactly right. And that's why I always, not to get into like a sales conversation, but when agents say, well, don't you think your lead follow-up plan is a little over the top or a little aggressive? To which I always respond, well, that's the only experience you're giving the prospect on how you do business such that it becomes the value proposition. Mr. Prospect, let this be an example of how I work for my clients. You see the other agents that are more passive, and now you're demonstrating to the seller the type of agent you are. Okay, now let's talk about lastly, where to find these leads, right? This is like the huge question. All right, so let me share my screen to give people some really good nitty gritty like details. All right, so we recommend that you get your data from a company called Vulcan 7. There's many companies out there, but we'll put a link to them in the description. And I want to give people, Tucker, an idea of what we're talking about. It's easier for you and I to just draw some stuff on a iPad, but like, let me give people exactly what we're talking about here. So this is a tool inside Vulcan 7. You can pull up, anywhere in your market. You can draw a radius, and here's what you do. So over here, this is where you could start to really build more targeted lists. So if you just drop these down, you could start to include properties that are free and clear, empty nesters, high equity sellers, notice of defaults, absentee owners as an example, likely to list. You could search by minimum price points like we just talked about, right? If you just want to focus on a certain price point, you could do that. You could focus on specific property types like we just talked about. And then property details. You could say, okay, I want to just focus on this type of property, or properties that were built here or here, or people that have owned homes here or here. And so this allows you to take all of these tens of thousands of people that live in your market and say, okay, how am I going to best use my prospecting time so that I get the biggest juice from the squeeze, versus just randomly cold calling, circle prospecting people? This would be the way to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if it's a circle prospect, and I'm not saying this is the case, but if a circle prospect, just random person, converts at a 1%, maybe a 2% if you're good. If they convert from contact lead at 2%, but an absentee owner converts at 5%, you're going to more than double the amount of leads you're putting in your pipeline. Or you're going to cut the amount of time that it takes to put the amount of leads you need. You're going to cut that time in half or more than half. So that's what it means. It's like all other skills, you could be great, you could be terrible. All other skills equal, you're going to really shorten your timeline to getting to building out that pipeline.
That's right. Because if you're going to spend 2 hours doing the work that Tucker and I are asking you to do, which is to go out there and generate conversations instead of just waiting around for business, if you're going to spend 2 hours having 20 conversations, you might as well have them with 20 people who have the highest likelihood that are going to be selling.